In this step of the wizard, we're going to add a patient to the program through the patient information screen. So we're going to get started by clicking Next. And here we can enter the patient number or the code. Now this is the patient's count number or code within your office. TPS assigns a specific code to this patient behind the scenes. Since this is patient number 1, TPS also automatically assigns a patient code for you. Now if you have a pre-existing patient coding system, you can go ahead and use that. Note that you do not have to use numbers and you can use letters if you want, such as the first 4 characters of the patient's last name and then 006. Also note that if you're getting a conversion, that all of this information in the patient section is done for you, so you do not have to enter anything additional to the patient information section. It's part of all the conversion levels, starting from 1 through 3. We're going to go ahead and leave that as number 1, but like I said, I could make it 1A if I wanted to. Next, contact information starting with the title. Dr., Mr., Mrs., Miss. Let's go ahead with Mr. Then we have patient's first name. Clicking Next, we have the middle initial and the last name of the patient. And we're going to go with something plain like patient. Ben J. Patient. Click Next. Here we have the scheduling name. This is the name that will appear on the appointment book when you schedule the patient. Now by default, it uses the first name and the last name, and then automatically creates the scheduling name. Now let's say they went by a different name, like Benny. I could go ahead and put that in here. Benny Patient. People like Robert could be Rob. Basically, this is whatever the patient goes by rather than their actual name that they may have on official paperwork. Note that the scheduling name is only used for the schedule and not anything else. Go ahead and click Next. Here we can enter the patient's address. Any additional address information. The city. State and zip. And their home phone number, if they'd like to be contacted there. A work phone number if you need to contact them for an emergency or while they're not at home. And then a cell phone number if they'd like. Speaking of cell phones, here we have the SMS gateway. SMS stands for Short Message System and is basically the protocol or rule system that cell phones use to send text messages. You see, within TPS, you can assign certain information, such as cell phone numbers or emails, to the patient. And as long as you know which particular cell phone carrier they're using, you can use Document Solution, another program we offer here at Eon, to send appointment reminders based off appointments created in your appointment book. It's a very handy and nifty feature. When you click the drop-down, you can see a large existing list of carrier providers. Here we have AT&T, Verizon is in here as well, Virgin Mobile, a very large list. You can add more to this system within a particular registry setting if you need to. Note that if you want to utilize this feature, you must enter a cell phone number for the patient or an email, or both if you want to send reminders to the cell phone and the email. Next, we have a patient's fax number if they have one, the email if they have one, here we have the send to email checkbox, text to cell phone checkbox. Once again, these are the checkboxes that will allow you to send cell phone texts or email reminders based on the patient's future appointments. Here we have the checkbox that says Use Appointment Reminder in Report. Now TPS allows you to print a report known as the Appointment Reminder Report that will list all your patients scheduled for appointments as long as this particular box is checked. Checking this box will allow those patients to show up in that particular printout. Here we can load a photo of the patient if you have one. You would simply click this button and then browse your computer for the patient's photo. Please note that the photo should be stored on the server and that all the workstations that may be using TPS can see the location of the photo, otherwise you won't actually see the picture. It has to be stored in a generalized location that all machines can access. Clicking Next. Here we can delete the picture if we don't need it anymore or the picture needs to be changed. Here we can enter the gender, occupation of the patient, such as teacher, their social security if they'd like. Now, this isn't required for cash patients, but if they're going to be billing via an insurance carrier, you will need to take this information down. You can continue without entering any information into the social security section though. Here we have the birth date of the patient. The age will automatically calculate based on today's date and the birth date you put into the program. Driver's license number if you need one. This field is optional and does not need to be completed if you don't need it. Here's some additional information based on the driver's license. Preferred confidential contact method. Here's where you'll enter the patient's preferred method of contact, such as please contact for email on most days unless, etc., etc. So for the most part, you can contact the patient via email unless a certain situation arises and perhaps they'll give you access or permission to call their cell phone. Clicking Next. We'll now move on to the Additional Info tab. Here's where we can assign the primary provider for this particular patient. The primary provider does a few things within the program. Namely, it's the default provider for the patient whenever a provider is necessary, such as adding a service. You of course can add services for any provider entered into the program. This is simply their primary/default provider. Go ahead and click Next. Here we have the finance charge days for this particular patient. That is, the amount of days that need to go by in a particular balance or service before a finance charge will be applied to the patient. This overwrites any finance charge you may have set in the business ahead of time. The weight of the patient, their height, date of first visit. Now, if you're coming from a previous program, you may want to enter this ahead of time if you don't have a conversion. However, when you're entering new patients into the program, as in this is the first time they're coming to visit you, when you enter the first service, this date will automatically populate with that service date. So you can leave this alone for brand new patients. We're going to do that. Leave it alone. Click Next. Date of last visit. Again, this automatically populates with the most recent service entered into the program using that service date as their last visit date. Here you can enter an automatic discount percentage for this patient and all their services. Maybe they're a long-time patient, they won some sort of prize you were offering, they're friends of the family. Whatever the reason, you can enter in a default percentage rate that will discount all their services entered. Go ahead and click Next. Here we have miscellaneous code 1 and miscellaneous code 2. This is for your purposes in the office. If you have some certain information that you need to enter for this patient, you can do so here. This is an old section from the DOS days of TPS and can be ignored for now. Here we can collect subjective findings via the signature pad for this particular patient. Note that before you can collect any subjective findings via a signature pad, you must first purchase the signature pad with subjective findings module and the Documenter program from here at Eon. Once you have those, when the patient comes in, you can set up particular subjective questions for the patient to answer when they sign in for the day. Now, you can set this particular setting in your clinic information. However, it can be overwritten for particular patients on a person-by-person basis here in the patient information screen. Here we have the race, language, and ethnicity for the EHR Meaningful Use module. This information is covered in other webinars and videos, so I'll go ahead and skip through this section. Here we are on the third tab. This is information about relations and contacts. The first section is your spouse's name. If the patient has a spouse and they've given you their information, you can go ahead and put that in here. Basically, this is just for extra contact information in case the patient cannot be reached. Spouse social security number, their employer name, their phone number. Here we can enter the information for the patient's employer. We entered he was a teacher, so let's go ahead and say he teaches at Place Middle School. Next, the address, city, state, and zip, and then the possible contact number for this employer. Here we have the emergency contact. It could be the spouse, the employer, or somebody else that the patient designates as their emergency contact. If this is a child, it could be the patient's parent. the phone number for the emergency contact. Here we have the referral section. In TPS, you can track how your patients were referred to your office. Earlier in the setup, we went through a section of the wizard where you could enter in different referral sources. Clicking this drop-down, we can see different options. Currently, we only have two: Online Yellow Pages and Patients. Online Yellow Pages is pretty simple and just says that the patient got to you via the Yellow Pages on the internet. Patients, however, comes preloaded with the program and indicates that one of your existing patients was the referral. If you were to select that, you could then pull up the patient's information from within the program to note here in this patient's information screen. So let's say Ben was here because Fred Kane decided, hey, you should come to this chiropractic office. It's great. This allows you to track referrals from other patients and perhaps give out rewards for having them refer other patients to your office. Let's just go ahead and say that he did the Online Yellow Pages. If you had selected patients, their information would pop up here based on the information already in TPS. Here we have the user definable fields. This particular tab is for information pertinent to your office that we didn't cover. We went ahead and assembled a fairly thorough patient information screen. However, certain dates and certain information may not be listed in the previous tabs that you may want to keep track of in your office. Up at the top here, we have 4 different date boxes you can use. In the middle, we have small text boxes for tiny bits of information like favorite chewing gum. Double bubble, because it's the best. Down here we have memo fields. Memo fields are much like text boxes, except they can have an enormous amount of characters. This is where you'll want to keep continuing information, such as patient history before and with this office. Note that each of these boxes has a user 2, 3, 4, etc., except for favorite chewing gum. You can alter these labels in front of the text boxes and date boxes and memo fields via the registry, and we'll go ahead and go over that in a later video. That way you can have favorite chewing gum, favorite activities such as leisure or hobbies, so forth and so on. Go ahead and click Next. Here we have the EHR Vitals tab along with all the other EHR Meaningful Use Module tabs that are part of the EHR Meaningful Use module. To access and utilize these, you must first purchase that particular module for this program, and then the additional information regarding these are covered in the extra videos and webinars pertaining to EHR. The EHR Meaningful Use module and how to use it within the program is not covered within this particular training CD series. We do have other webinars and videos you can refer to though. So if you need some help, go ahead and contact us here at Eon and we'll point you in the right direction. Clicking Next to go through the rest of these will bring you to the end of the patient file. Now we could go ahead and continue to add more patients if you've got more, or if you're done for now, you can click No and move on to the patient's claims. We're going to go ahead and do that.